What's up, YouTube? This is Too Raw for TV. So, in this other contest, which really isn't that much of a contest, you have the Denver Nuggets going against the Los Angeles Clippers. And while it's very apparent that the mainstream sports media is always going to openly root for the opponent of the Clippers, I mean, have you noticed that? Everybody, outside of Clippers land, was rooting for the Clippers, was rooting for the Mavericks in the first round. Why? I don't know. They lost. Now a lot of people have, for some reason, gotten on the Nuggets bandwagon. And I don't know why, but in basketball, scoring is great, all right? To have a nice, high-octane offensive team is very entertaining to watch, and it does put butts in the seat, but it's not usually indicative of a championship. To win a championship, you have to be able to get consistent defensive stops, especially as the game goes on. Denver is not noted for their defense. The Clippers are, however, very noted for the defense. You could say, that the Clippers are not a team that has a laser focus right now. They are somewhat inconsistent at times. I think they get bored and they can turn it off and on. But another team that was like that was the Cavaliers. When LeBron, the second time he was there, they were often like that. They would play to the level of their opponents. They could, beat. They were even worse than the Clippers in this aspect because they could beat, let's say, the Warriors in a regular season game by 25, right? And in the next night, play against a team like Sacramento and lose at home by 15, and it didn't like the same team. And the difference between that Cavaliers team and this team is that Cavaliers team, especially as LeBron got older, they had some issues with defense. Especially perimeter defense. That's not a problem with the Clippers. And the Clippers won by the final score of 113 to 107. Can't remember who had what. I know Paul George had 32. He led all scorers with the Clippers, at least. Markieff Morris had 12 points and 4 rebounds. Kawhi Leonard, 23 points, 14 rebounds, 6 assists. Lou Williams had 10 points. Montrezl Harrell had 11. And Green had 7. For the Nuggets, Nikola Jokic started off blistering, finished with 32. But the Nuggets went away from him in the second half, especially the fourth quarter. Jamal Murray had 14 points. I think they did a pretty good job of slowing him down somewhat. You could argue that maybe he was just missing some shots he normally makes, but the defense probably had some effect on that as well. And, another thing that could be affecting Denver more so than they're letting on is Denver maybe a team because of the pace that they play, and maybe they're still, to an extent, are still feeling some of the effects of that first round series. You know what I'm saying? Do you think, I'm just putting this out here to my subscribers, do you think that Denver is still maybe somewhat fatigued from that first round series? And that maybe it's affecting them later on in the game as far as the outside shooting? You know what I'm saying? I'm just bringing it up because when you're outside, when you're a 3-point shooting team, you're going to have nights where you miss and sometimes when you make, right? But whenever I see a team that consistently seems to miss throughout the game in the second half, especially the four quarters, then I start wondering if fatigue is actually a factor. You know what I'm saying? Look, they're not the first team, and they won't be the only team to go through a 7-round series, but that was a very fast-paced, even by this era standards, first round. You know what I'm saying? And it went down to the wire. It was not only physically exhausting, but in some ways, you could argue it was emotionally exhausting. Especially what was going on at the time in Wisconsin and whatnot. The players were going through the other extracurricular activities with the protesting, and I'm just throwing that out there. This is a very unique situation we're in right now. So I wonder, if for some of these guys they're feeling an extra burden, and whether some of the extracurricular stuff that's going on might be having an effect on these guys. I remember during the lockout in '99, right? And I remember a lot of those guys were not playing. Remember, the season was supposed to have started, as usual, in late October, very early November, right? As the years have gone on, increasingly it starts like the last week of October. All right, but this is the thing. They didn't start playing basketball until February, so a lot of those guys weren't in the best of shape. Some of those guys notoriously got very out of shape during that lockout. Guys like Shawn Kemp, he went from being 280 to 320 during that lockout. Antoine Walker, who came in at about 224, remember he ballooned up to almost 250, and that's when he became more of the Antoine Walker that just wanted to settle for threes. A lot of those guys had conditioning issues. Then when basketball restarted, these guys had a very hectic schedule where oftentimes they would play back-to-backs periodically. They would play sometimes 4 games in 5 nights. So sometimes I do wonder, in these scenarios, just wondering if you think fatigue could be a factor with Denver still. The Clippers are very deep. The Clippers have so many different weapons. As we all know, Kawhi does not play heavy minutes. I would gather that he only averaged about 30 minutes a game during the regular season, maybe even 29 minutes a game. He's famously does not play back-to-backs. He's probably sat out 15 to 16 games during the regular season. Paul George missed some time. Patrick Beverley missed some games due to some injury issues, and that's why this lineup never was on the court for that long. I think they were only on the floor for altogether before the stoppage. Only 12 games out of the season were they on the floor altogether. But you wonder if that now these guys have become more acclimated playing with each other. And they're not as fatigued as some of these other guys are. So that's all I had to say, man. I think Denver's going to lose this series. They could. I'll put it like this. This series is not going to go 7. I think either the Clippers are going to win this 4-1 or 4-2. Possibly 4-2. You know what I'm saying? I think they have their eye on LA. That's who they're hungering after. You know what I'm saying? They're not the most disciplined team. The Bulls were a more disciplined team. In '91, when they had something to prove, they had their eye on the Pistons, but that didn't keep them from doing what they had to do. You know what I'm saying? They took care of business. They took care of the Knicks in the first round. That's the series where Jordan had that infamous baseline dunk on Ewing. The next round, I think they took care of who did they play in the next round? I think it might have been Philly. They got, they dispatched the team they had to get rid of in the second round, and then in the conference they swept the Pistons. To the point where, but then they knew that that wasn't the final destination. The final goal was to win a championship, which they did in 5 against the Lakers. The Clippers, I think, are a team on a mission, and the only thing that can hurt the Clippers is themselves. You know what I'm saying? If they get too arrogant, which I don't think they will. Not when you have a guy like Kawhi Leonard on your team. You know what I'm saying? He's the ultimate assassin right now in the NBA, and I love his mindset. He's an old school player. I love his game. I'm gonna tell you another thing I like about the Clippers too, and one of the callers on Ticket Show made this point. They sort of remind you of a '90s team. You know what I'm saying? There's some inside play. There's a lot of mid-range play, and there is, of course, a lot of three-point play, but it's not an overdose of it. It's a nice balance. And as a former basketball enthusiast, now more of just a basketball observer, I love watching that. The way that a lot of these teams play now, where they're shooting 40, 50, 63s regularly, it's monotonous and it's kind of boring, but we'll see. Tell me what you guys think.